and say welcome everyone to this Coaches Cafe, our first of 2018. It's good to see some of you joining us here and some that will be listening in to the recording. We welcome you as well. We're going to be talking today about bodybuilding roles and what I want you to be thinking about, and we'll be asking you to maybe even type into the chat some of your biggest aha moments that you had in regards to bodybuilding roles. As you think through the discussion and as you hear us talking a little bit about the core beliefs related to bodybuilding roles, think in terms of, for you personally, was there an aha moment that came as a result of this? What was it? And how did it affect you? And then we're also going to ask everyone to be thinking about sharing with us some of the significant ways that you have used this. If you have any particular exercises that you've done, or if you have any variations on some of the exercises that might be in the coach's manual, or anything related to that you'd like to share with the group, we'd like you to be thinking about that, and we'll have opportunity to bring that up. I'm going to do a quick little screen share here, this morning I am away from my desk where I have multiple monitors, so I hope that this time it's going to show up properly. Let's see if I can get, yeah, there we go. I'm going to share with you, looking at the manual. Give me a nod of a head there, Ken. You can see that one? Good. So this is the latest version of the coach's manual, the Grip-Birkman coach training. And this is a handy resource for you long after training, we hope. If any of you have not downloaded the most recent version of this, go to the Grip-Birkman.com resources page there for coaches. And be sure to download this, this latest version of the Coach's Training Manual. And I'm going to look down here at talking about spiritual gifts in bodybuilding language on page 37. And we see that our core belief here, God designed us with strengths and weaknesses. He designed every person to play a role in strengthening, building, and expanding the body of Christ. The weaknesses create need areas where we build each other up. So trying to get there in a concise, three statements there, how we are looking at both our strengths and our weaknesses, or our blind sides, when we are talking about living and working in the body of Christ, how we use our gifts to expand the body of Christ by playing the role that we're supposed to be playing in body life, but then also taking a close look at those need areas, our blind sides, and who on our team do we need because they have strengths that we do not have, just as we do with the team styles that we looked at last month. Our core biblical belief is coming out of Ephesians 4:16. From him, the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. And just a quick reminder of the now 6 bodybuilding roles that we have on the list. You'll recall that there were 5 before. We now have added the supporting releaser as a bodybuilding role. So we have active listener, equipping releaser, supporting releaser, team builder, values keeper, and vision sharer. Those are the 6 bodybuilding roles. And as you did your inventory online, and as you saw which of those came to the top of your own list, which of those came as your most needed list, bodybuilding roles where you're looking to other people. And just again, a quick review, a quick reminder. Some of the questions that we ask as we're evaluating this: where do you feel that you are powerful? And we can talk about that in the roles that we have as we look at just some additional descriptors there. And also the question of who do you need, which is a key part of our understanding ourselves. And it's, of course, a very key part to building unity in the body, because of the fact that each one building each other up and encouraging others in their gifts, we actually need those people because they have gifts and strengths that we do not have. just a quick reminder again about the body building, the blending, the gift blending chart that can help with that. Sometimes to help us particularly with that integrity of the corners as we're checking, looking at the potential gifts that go with each of these roles. And then sometimes that can help us to ask a question when someone has perhaps put a bodybuilding role down, but it doesn't seem to jive with their gifts. What is happening there? What kind of questions do we need to ask them to help them to see, is this a matter of they're trying to do some gift projection, and really and truly the bodybuilding role could point to where the real giftedness is, or is it the other way around, and have they maybe misinterpreted some of the questions or something like that to perhaps come up with the bodybuilding role? Or are they looking at this from a different point and they say, hey, I'm coming at this from a different gift combination, and how does that play out then for them with their own bodybuilding roles? And of course, then there's also the chart helping us with the bodybuilding roles in detail, and a new section of that over on the right side there with indicators of the role as it's being fulfilled, how we see other people likely responding to us when we are acting out of our bodybuilding role. So with just that quick overview, let's talk about how you as a coach, let me get back over here and unshare my screen again. How have you as a coach been impacted by what you learned about yourself from your bodybuilding roles? And what was perhaps an aha moment for you? Yeah, just go ahead and speak up.
Now, Larry, while we're having people respond, let me encourage everybody to mute when they're not speaking so we don't get the background noise, and then you can remember to unmute when you need to speak up.
Thank you, Jay, and I'll try to watch for that too. So how have you been impacted, and what has been a big aha moment for you with your own bodybuilding roles?
Can I start here, Larry?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. One of the things that I have experienced is every once in a while I've run across a situation where somebody's bodybuilding roles don't seem to match with their with the other side of the triangle, with the left side of the triangle. And it's always interesting to have that discussion at that point in time, because in almost every one of those situations, a person has written the profile from the perspective of, this is how I see myself, and this is what my gifts are. This is how I expect what I bring to the team. But in this context, I've got to fill a different role. So I'm not the vision sharer because there's somebody else who's the vision sharer, even though that's where my gifting lies. It creates an interesting discussion when there's a discord between those bottom roles, and almost always there's kind of a bunch of aha moments in that process when a person's saying, okay, now I understand why this is different, and what the implications of that is that in this context, in this team, I need to lead with a different kind of gift mix than in other teams I've been a part of, or that traditionally I've seen myself. It leads to some very interesting discussions.
So Ken, do you see, is that a matter of different gifts coming to the top given the situation that they're in?
Yeah, and I think, or the different mix, like I said, somebody who, for example, all their life has been a vision share. One of the things they see themselves as a vision sharer, and that. But in this context, they may not be they may not be the person who sets vision in that team, and so they have to fill a different role.
Okay.
And so God uses their gifts in different ways, and He mixes their gifting in different ways, and it's fascinating to see how that happens, and it comes up because there's this discord, usually this harmony between, your bodybuilding roles, and when there isn't harmony between those two, it creates some interesting discussion. not seen it a lot, but seen it once in a while. And there's lots of aha moments in that. It's an interesting situation.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting the way God says, "Hey, this is the team I brought together, and here's the way I'm going to use you all."
Yeah,
Uh,
it is.
Ken, I really appreciate that example. I just want to make an observation that probably everybody noticed, but dialogue was the important word that you used there.
Yeah,
Because I think as a new Grip-Birkman coach, my immediate reaction would be to explain that. Why is that accurate? And why should that either be changed or, you need to understand it differently, but I think as mature coaches, we should just be more at peace that we don't have to defend or explain the tool. It's a tool for dialogue. And that was really good that you reminded me of that, just that, okay, what does that mean in this team for you?
yeah, Jay, and I appreciate you pointing that out, because there have been several times when I have come across people and they have felt like their coach was trying to convince them about something in their profile. Well, your profile says this, and the person saying, "Wait a minute, I'm just not sure that jives," and the coach has spent, in the opinion of the coachee, the coach has spent a lot of time and pressuring them. I actually had one person to say they felt pressured to accept what the assessment said. And as you point out, Jay, if we're in this dialogue, perhaps we can draw out of them more of what are you thinking? What were you thinking when you took the assessment? How are you feeling right now? And how is God speaking to you through all of this? So thanks a lot, Jay, for that reminder to us that we're supposed to be dialogue coaches.
Yeah, I have to remind myself of that constantly, so that's probably why I notice it. But I'm a natural born teller. So Ken, I want to ask you a question based upon that example. So do you believe that with the leadership grip that different gifts will rise up based upon what's demanded of me in the environment?
Yeah, I think what happens, and my experience was that had a situation where a person disagreed with the bodybuilding roles. And so I said, well, when you wrote this, what were you thinking in terms of team? Because there's lots of team questions. What were you thinking? They went back and rewrote it and put themselves in a different team in their mind, saying, okay, what do they expect of me? How answer those questions. It came out very differently. Their spiritual gifts didn't come out differently per se, but what happened in the bodybuilding role side was a shift. And so how we view ourselves when we're thinking, especially doing the leadership grip, there seems to be a lot of flexibility in terms of how I view myself in this context, this team that I'm in, and it shifts the way that I answer the questions, and it shifts the way that I view myself in the context of that team.
And you make me also think about, like, there were some instruments, the Birkman is not this way, but some instruments, it depends upon the context in which you take it, like the disc. Take it at work or at home, it's going to change. And that the leadership grip may be a little bit more like that. And you also reminded me that the way that the website is set up, we can actually go and see how they answered certain questions.
Yes.
And help them process that.
Yeah. So I've actually had people write it more than once. So 6 months later, we're having this discussion and say, well, do me a favor, let's write it again. And this time I want you to think of it in terms of the team you lead, not in the team you're a part of. So think of it in terms of you're, I don't know, pick a situation. You're head of the CE department in your church. How do you work with that team? So let's write the profile in terms of how you see yourself in that context. Well, that looks very different than a staff member on the lead team, and it actually comes out. The main change is in the bodybuilding roles. That's the interesting. The rest of the profile doesn't change substantially. It's in the bodybuilding roles that you see the shift, at least in my experience.
So it is the role that they're being called on to play at this particular moment, the way you're seeing it there.
It seems that way. Yeah. So that's been fascinating to me because I've never seen a spiritual gifts inventory that actually caught that context that we put ourselves in.
Uh-huh. Yeah. But thanks for that, Kim, because that's really fascinating to think in terms of. One thing I'd ask you, Kim, in your observation with that, it seems that the order of them has changed, but has the mix, the basic mix of the bodybuilding roles, so the ones that tend to come to the top and the ones that tend to come to the bottom, has that changed in those contexts?
Yeah, I think there's substantial change, which is interesting. Yeah. So it's not just reordering. There's actual, and in my experience, what happened is, how when we do the connection between the my gifts and the bodybuilding roles, there's this disconnect between, well, most people who are this here usually are here on the bodybuilding role side. And when you have that disconnect, that opens up the discussion. And he said, in the few times that happened, and I've spent time with people trying to digest that, it's been for them, very eye-opening.
Yeah. Kim, while we're on this, I'm just curious also, how does that dialogue then carry over into a team dialogue when you're talking with that person who's now seeing themselves in a different light in this team?
Happily enough, several times this has happened in the context of teams. And so actually in a team debrief. And what happened, the one I'm thinking of in particular is that we're talking with the staff team. And in the middle of that, I had the senior pastor saying to the staff member, you know what? I see that in you. I see when you're in this team, you fill this role, but I sure understand that when you lead your particular ministry, it's you act very differently. I see God using you in very different leadership roles and ways. And it was very interesting, affirming in that context, because we'd already had a dialogue one-on-one, and so talked about this. And so the person I was talking about actually brought it up to the team. Oh, by the way, I wrote this a second time. And when I wrote it the second time, I thought about it in terms of my role, not in this team, but in the team I lead in the church. And it comes out very differently. So the team said, would you mind sharing that with us? They did. And there was a lot of ahas around the table saying, you know what, I affirm both your place on this team, and I affirm the way God uses you as you lead.
Wow.
It was a fun experience. And like I said, I found myself kind of sitting back and just watching it happen, and just kind of celebrating.
Ken, just a quick question. For them to retake or rewrite the leadership grip, the only way to do that is to pay an additional $10, right?
Yeah, that was yeah.
Well, or is it? Can't they go back into their profile and reorder the?
You know what? I've never. I don't know. In this context, I just said to them, "It's worth $10. Let's write it again." So,
okay.
So.
Yeah, but I think that's the other thing with that question. I think you're right, Ken. It doesn't take that much, $10, but that the way that it's set up is processing. You know, give them all the lists. Give them all of the charts that compare all of those, and let them process it themselves. It's another way without having to pay the 10 if you want to. Don't want.
Yeah, so they could conceivably go do that then. Now, Ken, a logistical question that you can answer to that: if they are going to retake your leadership grip, there is an issue with their email address that they're using, right?
Yeah. Trying to think. I think what would happen is that if they called, they would just get a different password. So when you log in with that password, and so you can log in with an email address and a different password, or I think, I'm not sure how they did that. that was before I was doing support. So the other option, of course, is simply that it's easy to delete the first one and write a second one. So,
but you and Anna Dawn can work with them on that then.
we're happy. Anna Dawn is happy to work with him on that.
Good, thank you. Hey, thanks for that.
I have a question.
Yeah, Les.
If I was to have someone redo the grip, leadership grip, would there be value at that point of pulling out that old sheet we used to use, here's what I think of you, and bring in yet other insights from people who know you from a different perspective? Because if I'm struggling or my coachee's struggling, to see myself as fitting the scores, as it were, versus what I'm sensing, that sheet might help bring in some support. Like for myself, for instance, when I first took the grip, Mercy came out down at the bottom, right below I kicked cats. And but when I did that sheet, here's what I think of you, every single person who responded to that explained that they had connected to me because of an act of mercy. And so doing mercy and scoring mercy on an inventory were two different things. And I had to struggle through that and realize that, hey, I am capable of behavior that doesn't show up when I do an inventory. And I'm just wondering if we're working with a coachee who's struggling to fit the scores, that might be a tool that we might want to make use of. Does that make sense?
Wow, not only does it make sense, that's a fantastic plug for yes. I think everybody would agree. Jay, I see your head really going up and down too.
Yeah, I think what Ken, the question, and what you said really makes me realize the importance of helping people to process the leadership grip.
Yeah.
And to feel the freedom to move it around. I still remember my first training. It was actually a Birkman coach. I've struggled with administration on my top gifts. And he kind of processed it with me, asked me questions, and said, well, do you feel like you can mark it off now and replace that with the other that you were talking about, wisdom? And so he gave me the power to do that. So, yeah, you're just making me think, let's not lean on totally the inventory. Let's bring in the process and the community in that process.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely agree. And Les, thanks for bringing that to us, because that is the reason that particular tool is there, so that we can get some 360-degree kind of feedback from other people. You really do get a lot more insight into your own giftedness by seeing how other people are seeing you acting, looking at us from that other side, that Johari window, of what others see in me that I don't see in myself. And that's a real affirmation for many of us in terms of our giftedness. And sometimes it's a big aha moment for us as well. Leslie, I'm just also curious, how have you used that instrument, here's what I think of you?
I actually use it every time I work with a coachee. I just drag it out, and usually I bring, because it's not attached to the online tool, right. I usually have a copy when I sit down with them the first time, because invariably there is some question. I don't see that. I don't see that played out in my life. This is flawed. And then you talk about your phrase there, the 360 view of myself. I bring that out and say, well, how about if we do this? Let's finish up what we're talking about here. And why don't you take this, make a few copies of it, hand it out to some folks you think will be honest with you, who know you, and bring those back, and we'll talk about that next time we sit and chat. So that's how I have used that. And usually the second time we go through it with that outside information, there's usually a, oh yeah, that's right.
Uh-oh, Les, I think you froze up on us there, but
Nope, I'm here.
okay, there you go.
I just stopped talking.
Oh, okay. Your video also froze on me. So, but so yeah, I used to send that instrument and ask them to get five responses at least back on that before they came to, particularly to a team build. And to be honest, I fell out of that habit. And it's not on our inline inventory right now, but it is something that we have been discussing that we would like to get it into our online inventory to make it even automated so that you could put in the emails of people and it would go out. That's a great dream for us for the future, because I think we have neglected that instrument and its value in many cases. So thanks, Les, for reminding us of how valuable that one is. Let me ask if anyone else has had any great aha moments for yourself or with others that you've been coaching that really is something that stood out to you that you'd like to share with us from the bodybuilding world.
I have a struggle. I'm part of several leadership teams. I'm at my church. I serve my denomination. Mm-hmm. And when I went through it this time, some of my bodybuilding roles kind of shifted, and I actually see where they're now surfacing in what I'm doing more with the denominational level than here at the church, though the problem has surfaced at the church, and it's the equipping and supporting releaser has risen up and become more prominent. The denomination, they think that's really cool that I'm releasing all these guys in the ministry. But the problem is several of these guys have come out of my church, and my leadership team looks at, hey, wait a second, you're sending our people away. Because they're not just rising up in leadership, but they're actually looking to go into ministry. And we've had a series of men over the last few years leave. And so for me, it was kind of funny. But as I'm engaged in dialogue with others, they're not thinking it's that funny. That when you're actually doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're actually equipping the larger body of Christ, not just your little, we three and we four no more type thing. Mm-hmm. So that's an observation I've made as I've looked at my own scores with having retaken it since it was re-released.
Wow. So that creates a little bit of tension then, where you're exercising your gifts and you're playing the role that you're supposed to be playing, but it is juxtaposed by some of those other people, perhaps some of your values keeper type people who are having some problems with that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, especially those who let's stay together.
Oh, the let's stay together people. Yeah.
Yeah, how can we stay together if he keeps sending them away? And it's not like I'm sending them. I'm just giving them permission to do what they're called to do, and it's yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So I sympathize with that. But what a great aha also. And tell me how you work with them then to help them to, if not fully be supportive of it, at least to be understanding of it, and seeing that that's the health of the body that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think the biggest piece is to just keep talking about kingdom. We are serving the kingdom, and if we serve the kingdom, God grows the church. If we focus on growing the church, we end up losing everything. Because there's nothing in the Bible other than Jesus says he's going to grow his church about us growing my church. It's not our church. And so that's constantly got to be on the table in the conversation. And our role is to serve the mission. And the mission is to go and make disciples. It's to expand the gospel for the kingdom. And in doing that, sometimes some of our team players take new roles that may not be with our team anymore. And so that's the dialogue that we have. And when somebody does that, we make a big fuss about it. We celebrate, we party. And we try to keep it on our, let's keep praying for these family members who are no longer in the house anymore. That's really the way that we've been able to process it with any kind of success.
Wow, that's really going from I to we, isn't it? In the big, broader picture where you're saying, okay, we're going to be groups of we now, and our helping your stay together people say, let's talk about how we stay connected with other groups that are just like us through those people that we're sending out. Yeah, that's fantastic. Dwayne is asking if the instrument that we were talking about, the Here's What I Think of You instrument, is still available because he says it's not on an active link on the website. We need to check on that to see, Jay and Kim, we can, we'll need to check and see what we need to do to be sure that that is there, very prominent on the website. It is available in the training manual.
Page 73.
Page 73 as an appendix there, thanks. So you can find it there and you can duplicate it from that. But yeah, we need to be sure that we get that on the resource page available to you as a separate document.
And if you email Larry or me, I put my email address on the chat. I'll see that you get it.
There you go.
You need freestanding, but yeah, we need to, I'll make note to talk to John about that.
Great. Thanks, Jay. Good. So that was a great aha also, Les. Thanks for sharing that. Tell me, does anyone else have one that you'd like to share with us? And I'll try to be a good coach and let silence do the heavy lifting for me.
I'll jump in here. By the way, it's still dark in Washington, and we have a full moon.
So, Neil, if you start howling, we'll know what's going on.
I'm not fully awake yet.
Oh, thanks for getting up so early with us, brother.
So, one of the interesting situations that I've encountered now, like it seems like 3 different times, the bodybuilding roles seem very different than what I'm seeing on the Birkman. And so this discussion that we're having about like how you see yourself on the current team that you're in, or how you're using your gifts and your strengths in the context of the team you're serving on, is a helpful one. And I also see why that could easily create some conflict for someone by saying, well, this tool is really quite worthless because all it's doing is reflecting, you know, what I'm doing in this particular situation. But what I'm starting to realize is that as people learn about their strengths and they move towards and gravitate towards using their let's say their more dominant bodybuilding roles, and they see some satisfaction in it and they get positive feedback for it, then that creates something of a convergence for them where they can do more of that. They can choose to be on lead teams that are more like that, as opposed to choosing options that are either less fulfilling or ones that they're not as strong in. So I guess one of my questions would be is how do we coach people to, let's say, choose those team and bodybuilding environments where they can use their greatest strengths, and where they, you know, both from the Birkman, but they can also use the bodybuilding role that's
Yeah, Neil, I think you were chopping out there a little bit at the end there, but I think the gist of what I'm getting from you is when we're seeing a person who is acting out of their giftedness through their bodybuilding role, and that behavior seems very different from their Birkman, their usual natural style of behavior, right?
right.
And so the question, then let's throw it out to the group. The question then, Neil, that I'm hearing you saying is, how do we help them to reconcile that?
And I'll give you a concrete example. I have someone who is clearly more of a systems person in their work style, but their bodybuilding role that they project is as a team builder and a vision sharer. And yet they're fairly consistently frustrated with the, let's say, the type of community and experience that they're having. So the Birkman would say, you have these work styles over here on this side, but the bodybuilding roles that you say that you use most often are, let's say, more relational.
So I'm curious what you've done already, Neil, in that situation. How did you coach that?
Well, this is a new profile. I just picked it up, so I haven't really had a chance to coach the person through this yet.
Okay. So let's throw it out to the group then and just ask, how should Neil approach this? Anyone that wants to kick in, just unmute the mic and kick right in.
I might also add that in terms of interests, the person's interests are are the yellow interests, which would be administrative and numerical, are in the bottom 4. But their usual work style is over in the yellow.
Wow. So here's a case where you've got interests that are not in the same quadrant. For example, on the Birkman map, the interests are not in the same quadrant,
right,
as the usual style, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's start with that then. How do you approach that one? And then how do you move that over to their giftedness?
Well, I think with this particular leader, one of the things that I would want them to observe is, tell me about the times when you're able to use these interests that are very high, and what's been your experience when you do that. Talk with me about the success you felt. Talk with me about the joy you felt in working in that area. And then how did you go about that? What was your way of either doing that or contributing to it that allowed you to walk in those interests and just see what comes out of it. So in essence, creating some awareness around the times when they're using or able to live out of their interests.
Yeah. Okay. Now, and then talk to me about how you get them to make that transfer then from talking about it from looking at their Birkman over to where their real joy is coming out of their giftedness.
Mm-hmm. Well, the interesting thing is, as they talk about their interests, I think it's not as big of a leap to match those interests up with their spiritual gifts, because of the way the spiritual gifts inventory is written, it's more of an experiential inventory. So it's easier for them to find them using their gifts in the context of what interests them. But with the bodybuilding roles, that one's a little different, because that's when they're taking some leadership in the context of the body. And this particular leader has bodybuilding roles that would be a high team builder and high vision sharer. Both would seem very relational, but not all that connected with their interests.
So based on what Neil has shared with us, do any of the rest of you have any suggestions of how you might approach this or how he might approach this?
I might be interested to chat with them about their cognitive history of behavior that parallels this particular leadership role. Do they see things in their past that look like this, even though they might not have been an official leader or the in-charge person, that would parallel, because the Birkman is our natural person. This is who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And if that is accurate, then we ought to be able to see that behavior or expressions of that in other areas of our life previous to this time. And then once you have that, you might be able to then dialogue about what it means in this setting to find joy doing something else, or some value in balancing that with the roles or styles that we're struggling to match. And that's something I would probably play with. You know, I know, you know, I've seen people who have, when they're trying to write a purpose statement for life, you know, what is my purpose? Why am I here? You know, we look for a sentence that kind of captures our life. And usually if you get that right or close to right, you can see that as a teenager, as a young adult, and even wherever you are in life. And that's what I'm kind of thinking the Birkman is. It's that statement in a much bigger format. And so if we could shrink it back down, we might be able to see it and see that who I am doesn't necessarily lock me into one kind of behavior. I am a little more fluid than that. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry. Yeah, well, one thought there is to have them unpack for me what their frame of mind was when they were filling out this, like with the bodybuilding roles. What was a time in your life when you were involved with helping to build up the body, and what was your role in the context of that? And see if that doesn't give me some clue as to how that ties in both with their interests and their work style. You know, it's possible that they were describing a let's say a body life, let's say a mission team that they were on that was really meaningful to them, and their particular role on that team was kind of a vision casting, let's go kind of a person, and because of the makeup of the team, they were able to do that in a fulfilling way. But it doesn't come out that way on their Birkman. It doesn't even come out that way in their career, for example. It just happened to come out that way on the bodybuilding or the team that they happen to be on. And so just asking them the question of tell me about an experience when you were leading on a team or you were working with a team, and what was your experience there? Is a good one.
Yeah, that sounds really you know, on track to me, because you're getting toward the joy and the passion questions there with them too. You know, how did that feel? You know, what kind of, how fulfilled did you feel in that? Those kinds of questions. And you know, ultimately, in some cases like that, you're going to see some people who have been in roles that were frustrating to them because they weren't able to fully exercise their gifts. And it sounds to me like you're having some suspicions about something like that. Is that right?
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, the particular job that or assignment that they're in is not a good match for their interests, and the bodybuilding roles that they're describing are also quite different than the assignment they happen to be in. So. Right. So then I'm wondering, you know, which needs to change?
Yeah, and be careful that you don't coach them to that without being where they necessarily want to go, but helping them to explore that and you know,
well, that's one of the reasons they came to me, is because they're exploring a career change.
Ah, okay, fantastic. Yeah. Well, you've got a lot of leads there then to help them explore.
Yeah,
some.
I think so. Yeah.
Very good. Hey, thanks for sharing that, Neil. We've got time for, I think, just one more. If someone else would like to share an aha, either your own aha, or even if you have another profile like Neil has shared with us, a specific profile that might be giving you a little bit of problems, particularly related to bodybuilding roles, if you have any of those, would you, anyone else like to share that? Did you have an aha moment with your own bodybuilding roles?
I can share from my experience going from business world to ministry.
Ooh, yeah.
There was a shift in basically my spiritual gifts, and then which affected my bodybuilding style of leading.
And so where was that shift?
Really came more of an exhorter because I was over all the small groups in a fairly decent sized church. And so that role of equipping releaser really moved forward, as well as being the encourager to keep our cell group leaders moving forward.
Mm. So how did that change when you discovered that about yourself, Bob? How did that change the way you approached that ministry?
Well, it fit with the role exactly.
Uh-huh.
And so changing from the business world where I ran a business, which basically you were a lot more dominant, whereas now I had to be a little more passive because I was dealing with volunteers, but yet still getting things accomplished.
Yeah.
And that was a hard shift, and the equipping releaser really helped me see that this is my real role, is to make sure I've trained them, make sure they're qualified first, make sure they're trained, and then how do I support and work with them? Kind of the situational leadership model that Blanchard talks about.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I was just thinking, what if you had used that information in the business world, and if you had approached it in that same way, how might things have been different?
Well, and some of that was true because I trained salespeople. So again, you had some of that already being accomplished, but I didn't understand it then, like I did once I went through the Birkman and began to go, oh, okay.
Great. Thanks for sharing that too, Bob. Another thing, guys, that occurs to me is that this is a great lead-in to us talking about the dotted diamond, because as we were discussing Neil and Les, particularly with those profiles and how they relate to interests and how that relates back to the Birkman map and to our Birkman usual style of behavior, and how our giftedness can lead us to act in a different way from what our natural personality might say we would usually be acting, looking at our behaviors and how they are affected by our giftedness. And that is something that we're hoping Paul Ford is going to be able to come and share with us soon. We're not sure if it's going to be our next session or not, because a few of the guys are going to be at our regularly scheduled time for our next meeting. They'll actually be at the Birkman International Conference in Atlanta the same day that we're supposed to be meeting with our next scheduled Coaches Cafe. So what we might want to do is take a quick poll on everyone and say, hey, are any of you planning to be there? Mostly this would be trainers that would be going to that. It would not necessarily be people who are normal coaches. And as I'm looking at the attending list of most of the people that usually attend here, not very many of our people would be planning to go to that, but it does affect a significant number of us. So you might want to just share with us your thoughts on that. We will send out a notice to let you know if we are going to be meeting next month for sure or not, or if we're going to try to alter the date on it. Jay, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I think there's be only 3 or 4 that are affected by that, as far as I know. Paul, Grady King, Tim Rell, and myself. As far as I know, those are the only ones going.
Okay, so we might still try to meet if you guys want to at our regularly scheduled time. I will not be at that meeting. At least that's not my plan right now. So we will definitely send out a notice, though, between now and then, and there will be something about it in the newsletter as well. Well, guys, we are approaching. Yes.
I just suggest you go ahead and have it, just keeping with the first Wednesday, and then we can fit Paul in perhaps the following month with the diamond.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
Go ahead and do that before. Yeah.
Paul's actually working on a new check worksheet to go with the dotted diamond, and he wants to share that with us. And we're excited to have him come and do that, because that is where we really and truly mesh the two instruments together when we look at how does our giftedness actually affect our behavior and the way that we would ordinarily, normally, naturally be acting if it weren't for the fact of the Spirit working in us. And we've heard a couple of really key examples today of how the Spirit has worked in such a way to make us act in a way that we might not expect. And we can't explain any other way except for the Spirit working in us. So we're coming close to the top of the hour. If anybody has anything else that you'd like to bring up or share with us, now is the time to do it. We have just a couple more minutes, and we'd be happy to take any more of those comments or questions that you might want to share with the rest of the group.
I do have a question. I don't know that it's a quick question. In fact, it might be relate to more of the follow-up you were talking about. But when the work style or the behaviors are so different than the strengths, and so in other words, the diamond is kind of like on the opposite side of the asterisk. How do you describe how that work style relates to being active in the area of interests? So I get a little bit from the dotted diamond point of view. I see that if people are called and gifted and they have a sense of passion, that the diamond can move in those towards the use of those spiritual gifts. But in a, let's say, just a regular workaday world assignment, those work behaviors are so different than interests. How do we help them to understand how to both the work style, like they do all the time, and actually live into their interests?
Yeah, and we see that pretty often, Neil, where on the Birkman map, where interests, the asterisk and the diamond of their usual behavior actually be in opposite quadrants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And sometimes there can be some pretty distant movement between those two.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things that we want to help people to see in that is just defining for them very briefly, the asterisk, your interests, are what you want to see accomplished. The diamond is how you go about accomplishing it. And so, once again, that's, in fact, using those people as some of our poster children to say, our behaviors are not necessarily indicators of what we want to see done. They are not indicators of the underlying motivation for our behaviors. And interests are hidden. They're only known to the individual, just as needs are hidden and only known to the individual. So we help them to see that you may have very green interests where you're really wanting to see people take the ball and run with it. You're wanting to see people motivated. You're wanting to get a message across to them. And the way you have decided is the best way to do that is in a very orderly, yellow, organized, analytical kind of a way. On the other hand, we will often see people with very red interests, but very blue behavior. And so those red interests that say, hey, I really want to see things getting done, I want to see a task done, but I really want to kind of get that task done in my own way with just a select group of people or just me by myself operating and not having to do a whole lot of direct communication. And those people many times have a lot that they want to get out, but they haven't been able to get it out because of their usual style of behavior. And we discovered there's a whole lot that they've got in mind, some very creative things they're wanting to get done in the way they're thinking about it, but you're not seeing them as those action kind of people. And so
just described my son.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I got a picture for that one.
Okay. So in his case, how does that work in how you've observed in him?
It turns out he's very entrepreneurial and likes to do. I think he's on a path where he's learning to build houses and custom houses. So the package that he's kind of putting together is working, with a small group of people to decide on what kind of big custom house they're going to put together, and then implements the construction of that through subcontractors. And so he works with the owners, small group of people, to get something big done.
So how would you coach him then in terms of his interests and his usual behavior?
Well, one of the things I've coached him on is if you really want to do this, you do need to learn from someone who is doing that and doing it very well. And in the early stages, it might not be all that pleasant with the stuff that you are working on, and he would agree with that at this point. But helping him to keep the bigger picture in mind, and leaning into and taking on challenges that would open the door for the ultimate goal.
Oh yeah, good. So helping him to keep his interest, if you will, using that language, keeping his interest up front in his mind of this is what I'm wanting to accomplish, and recognizing that he's going to go about it in this very blue kind of way.
Yeah, right.
Good, and then affirming him in that. That's fantastic.
Well, yeah, and at the early stages, I think it does take a lot of affirmation because it is difficult to see, especially if you're just starting out. It's difficult to see how those stepping stones actually start to build on top of each other. I think all of us have had those experiences in ministry where someone says, boy, I led that small group and it didn't work out at all.
Exactly.
And we pull it apart with them and say, well, just work on these basic levels first, and then let's see the pieces come together to get to let's say the ultimate goal that you had in mind when you started this thing.
There you go. Excellent. Well, guys, I don't know how, but we have used up a whole other hour again. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I really do enjoy our times together. I enjoy being able to dialogue with you, and thanks for all of you that have shared and participated. I hope this has been helpful. We do plan to be back again next month, as we said, since we will keep our regular schedule. I'm not exactly sure what topic we will use as our discussion starter, since Paul won't be able to be with us next month, but we will try to let you know what that is ahead of time, and we'll look forward to the discussion once again. So thanks so much for joining us in this monthly cafe. Jay, last word?
Just two business things. One is that the here is what I think of you handout is in the chat. So you should be able to download it. If you can't, my email is in the chat. Just send me an email and I'll give it to you through email.
Yeah, and I just clicked on that, and it should be downloadable. I was able to download it from there, so if you can find that in the chat, and I'll be sure and leave the window open for a few moments after we conclude here, just to be sure that everyone has been able to get that. Great. So guys, again, thank you all for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next month. God bless, and let's keep doing everything we can to build unity in the body of Christ so more people know Jesus.